The courtroom air was already heavy, but it thickened into something jagged when the judge's voice cut through it, sharp enough to draw blood. "Remove that medal before you stand before this court," he ordered, his gaze fixed on the glint of gold and ribbon pinned to the chest of the man at the defense table. Gasps rippled through the rows of observers, too soft to be called outrage, too sharp to be mistaken for silence. The man in the center of it all did not flinch, though. He stood still, his uniform pressed, his posture perfect, his eyes calm in a way that unnerved even those who thought they understood him. The judge had not looked at his face yet. He only saw the medal, a medal of honor, no less, an emblem that should have been beyond reproach. And yet, in this room, in this moment, it had become the very thing that drew suspicion. The bailiff shifted uncomfortably, fingers grazing the grip of his belt, as though the weight of that ribbon and metal was somehow a provocation. Someone in the gallery muttered something under their breath. No one dared say it louder. The man touched the medal lightly, not to remove it but to steady it, as if steadying himself. And in that instant, there was an unspoken defiance that filled the void where his words should have been. He could have explained himself, he could have corrected them. But silence for him was not weakness, it was armor. The judge's command was not merely an order to remove a piece of metal, it was an attempt to strip away something sacred, and everyone in the room felt the line that had just been crossed, though most would pretend later they hadn't seen it. His name was Marcus Hale, though few there knew it yet. Fewer still understood what that name meant, what weight it carried beyond these walls. All they saw now was a soldier standing accused, his medal gleaming under the courtroom lights like both a shield and a target. It wasn't the first time Marcus had been told to take something off, to lay down a weapon, to remove a patch, to leave a piece of himself behind for the sake of protocol. But this was different. This was someone asking him to lay down the one thing he had never surrendered, the honor he had earned, the memory of those who hadn't come home. His jaw tightened, the only hint of his reaction, and the silence between him and the judge stretched like a drawn bowstring, ready to snap. Marcus had not always been a man of silence. Once, long before this courtroom, before the medal, he had been a boy from a quiet Virginia town, the kind of place where cicadas hummed in the summer heat and the air smelled of pine and damp earth. He had been the youngest of three, the one who watched his father's hands oil a rifle he never spoke about, the one who heard his grandfather's stories only in fragments, never the whole thing, always enough to leave him wondering. He grew up with a reverence for service he couldn't quite explain, only feel. When he enlisted, he did it quietly. No grand declarations, no goodbyes in airports. He simply left, carrying with him a promise to himself that he would honor the sacrifices of the men and women whose names he had traced on memorial walls with trembling fingers. War didn't make Marcus Hale bitter. It carved him instead, hollowed the unnecessary, honed what was left. He saw things he would never speak of. The shimmer of heat on sand just before an ambush, the smell of metal and smoke clinging to his skin after firefights. The way silence fell differently after someone you knew stopped breathing. He learned how to hold that silence like a blade, sharp, controlled, always ready. Years passed, and Marcus returned home with a chest full of ribbons, a back scarred by more than shrapnel, and a medal he had never asked for, but carried because it wasn't his alone. It belonged to the men who hadn't come back, the ones who had called his name with their last breaths. It belonged to the unknown soldier whose tomb he now guarded, because even when the wars ended, Marcus didn't stop standing watch. He became a sentinel, one of those rare few entrusted to guard the tomb of the unknown soldier. Every step he took there was deliberate, a prayer and a promise woven into every measured stride. Tourists watched him in reverent silence, seeing only the precision. They didn't see the memories that kept him awake, the names he whispered under his breath as he marched. And now, after all of that, he stood in a courtroom where none of it mattered. The charge against him was almost laughable, if not for the venom behind it. A confrontation outside a government building. A misunderstanding that spiraled when an impatient officer failed to see past the uniform, jacket and medal, failed to recognize the quiet man who spoke little but commanded much. He was accused of obstruction, of non-compliance, of failing to immediately respond to orders shouted without reason. The irony was bitter. Marcus had spent a lifetime following orders, and now the judge told him to remove the medal. A murmur rippled through the courtroom again when Marcus didn't move. His stillness was louder than any protest could have been. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably, sensing something they couldn't name. The spectators avoided eye contact. A journalist in the back scribbled furiously, aware that something was unfolding but not sure yet what it meant. Marcus's silence was beginning to unnerve the room. It wasn't defiance in the way they expected. It wasn't loud or reckless. It was something heavier. Something that made even the bailiff's voice falter when he repeated the judge's order. Remove the medal. He didn't. Someone in the gallery whispered that it was arrogance. Someone else muttered that it was grief. But neither was true. Marcus's hand brushed the edge of the medal again, almost absently, as if grounding himself in its weight. There was another weight too, the one no one in that room could see yet, the name Hale. For Marcus, that name was more than his own. It was lineage, shadow, and legacy. His grandfather, Colonel Elijah Hale, had been one of the first black officers to lead troops in combat. A man whose bravery had been buried under decades of bureaucratic neglect before history finally caught up to him. His father had worn the uniform too, though quieter, always quieter, his service tucked into classified files and stories he would never tell. Marcus had never traded on that name. He'd never used it to open doors, never spoken it louder than anyone else. He believed in earning his own weight, carrying his own scars. But that name, the name that the judge had not yet heard, was about to tilt the room on its axis. The moment stretched. Someone shifted in their seat. The air conditioner clicked on overhead, filling the silence with a mechanical hum that felt deafening. And then finally the clerk, reading from the docket in a voice that carried farther than they meant it to, spoke the full name. Sergeant Major Marcus Elijah Hale. The judge's head jerked up. The name landed like a stone dropped into still water, rippling outward. For the first time, the judge really looked at him. Not at the medal, not at the uniform, but at the man. Recognition dawned, sharp and sudden, a memory surfacing from somewhere buried. The stories of Elijah Hale, the quiet hero his own father had once mentioned in hushed reverence. The name etched into plaques in military halls. Whispered with respect in circles this judge had once moved through but perhaps forgotten. The room felt it before anyone said it. Something had shifted. The order to remove the medal now hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Still present, but already dissipating, already souring. Marcus didn't gloat. He didn't speak. He didn't even move. He simply stood there, the silence around him suddenly less like defiance and more like judgment. Not from him, but from the weight of everything he carried. The judge swallowed, words faltering on his tongue. His earlier command seemed smaller now, almost childish in the shadow of what he'd just realized. A line had been crossed, and now the courtroom was holding its breath, waiting to see what would happen next. Marcus's silence had been his shield, but now it was his sword too. The bailiff looked at the judge, waiting for a signal. The prosecutor shuffled papers that no longer seemed relevant, and somewhere, deep in the gallery, an older man in a faded veteran's cap stood, not loudly, not dramatically, just stood. One by one, others followed. The shift was complete. The judge didn't repeat his order. He couldn't. Because some honors are untouchable. Some names carry a gravity you cannot strip away. And in that silent, electrified courtroom, everyone understood that Marcus Hale hadn't needed to say a single word to win. There are battles fought with weapons, and there are battles fought with silence. This one belonged to the latter, and as the gavel eventually fell, not on punishment but on apology, the lesson was clear. Respect is not requested. It is commanded. Not by volume, but by the quiet weight of honor earned. Marcus touched the medal one last time, not to defend it, but to remind himself of what it meant, of who it belonged to. And as he left the courtroom, the silence followed him. Not heavy now but reverent, like the hush that falls when a sentinel passes, guarding not just a tomb, but an idea, because some stories are not told in words. They are carried, and Marcus Hale carried them all.